She was told she would never walk again. He was scheduled to be put down in 48 hours. Nobody wanted either of them. But what happened when their eyes met for the first time would become a story that would travel across 7 countries and change everything we thought we knew about healing, hope, and the unbreakable bond between broken souls. This is the true story of Emma and Shadow, and I promise you, by the end of this journey, you'll never look at second chances the same way again. Emma Rodriguez was born on a rainy November night in a small town called Riverside, tucked away in the forgotten corners of rural Pennsylvania. Her mother, Maria, worked 3 jobs: cleaning offices at dawn, waitressing during the day, and folding clothes at a laundromat until midnight. Her father had left before Emma could even say the word, Papa. It was just the 2 of them against the world, a world that seemed determined to knock them down at every turn. Emma was different from other children, not because of what would happen to her later, but because of who she already was. At 5 years old, while other kids played with dolls, Emma collected injured birds. She would find them in the park, fallen from nests, wings bent at impossible angles. She would bring them home in her small, dirt-stained hands and whisper to them, "It's okay. You're going to be okay. I won't let you be alone." Her mother would watch from the doorway, tears in her eyes, knowing her daughter had inherited something rare. A heart too big for a world too cruel. By the time Emma was 7, she had saved 11 birds, 2 squirrels, and a cat that everyone said was feral. The cat, which she named Whiskers, slept on her pillow every single night. "How do you do it, mija?" her mother would ask. Emma would shrug, her dark eyes wise beyond her years. "I just tell them I understand, that I see them. That's all anyone wants, Mama, to be seen." But life has a way of testing the ones with the biggest hearts. On March 14th, 2 months after Emma's 9th birthday, everything changed. Maria was driving Emma home from school. It was raining. The roads were slick. A truck ran a red light. The impact was so violent that witnesses said they heard it from 3 blocks away. Maria died instantly. Emma survived. But when she woke up in the hospital 17 days later, she couldn't feel her legs. The doctors used words like spinal cord injury, permanent paralysis, and wheelchair dependent. But all Emma heard was, "You'll never run again, never dance, never feel the grass beneath your feet." She was 9 years old, and suddenly she wasn't the girl who saved broken things anymore. She was the broken thing, the thing everyone pitied, the thing nobody knew how to fix. Social services placed Emma with her aunt, Patricia, a woman who had never wanted children and made no secret of it. Patricia lived in a small, cramped apartment that smelled like cigarettes and disappointment. There was no room for Emma's wheelchair in the narrow hallways. No ramps, no modifications, just resentment wrapped in fake smiles whenever social workers came to visit. "You should be grateful," Patricia would say, blowing smoke toward the ceiling. Not everyone would take in a crippled kid. Emma would bite her lip until it bled. She stopped talking, stopped smiling, stopped believing that anyone could see her anymore. At school, kids stared. Some pitied her. Others mocked her. "Wheels," they called her. "Can't stand Emma." She ate lunch alone in the library, hiding behind books, disappearing into stories where broken girls became heroes. But the worst part wasn't the bullying. It wasn't even the wheelchair. It was the loneliness. The crushing, suffocating loneliness of being invisible. Of being the girl everyone looked at but nobody truly saw. She missed her mother with an ache that felt like drowning. She missed Whiskers, who Patricia had given away the first week. "Allergies," she had said. But Emma knew the truth. Patricia didn't want anything in the apartment that needed love. By the time Emma turned 12, she had learned to make herself small, to need nothing, to expect nothing. She kept a journal hidden under her mattress where she wrote letters to her mother. "Mama, I'm trying to be strong like you taught me, but I'm so tired. I'm tired of being the girl nobody wants. I'm tired of being broken." She never cried anymore. Tears were a luxury she couldn't afford. Then came the day that would change everything. It was a Thursday in late September. Emma's school had organized a field trip to Riverside Animal Shelter as part of a community service project. Emma didn't want to go. She never wanted to go anywhere. But her teacher, Mrs. Chen, the only adult who seemed to notice Emma existed, had insisted. "You love animals, Emma. This will be good for you." The shelter was a gray concrete building at the edge of town. It smelled like disinfectant and sadness. The director, a tired-looking woman named Margaret, greeted the class with a rehearsed smile. "Welcome, students. Today you'll learn about animal rescue and responsible pet ownership." Emma rolled her wheelchair to the back of the group, trying to disappear as usual. They walked through rows of cages. Dogs barked, some jumped excitedly, others cowered in corners. Emma watched them, her heart breaking with every pair of desperate eyes. These animals understood. They knew what it felt like to be abandoned, to be unwanted, to wait for someone, anyone, to choose them. Margaret led them to the adoption area, showing off the friendly dogs. Golden retrievers with wagging tails, beagles with hopeful eyes. But Emma wasn't paying attention. Her eyes had caught something else. At the very end of the corridor, in a cage separated from all the others, was a dog unlike any she had ever seen. He was massive. A German shepherd mix with scars across his face and a coat that was matted and dull. But it was his eyes that stopped Emma's heart. They were amber, almost gold, and they held a rage so deep it seemed to burn. A handmade sign on his cage read, "Danger, aggressive. Do not approach. Scheduled for euthanasia. September 28th. 2 days away." "That's Shadow," Margaret said, noticing Emma staring. Her voice dropped. "He came in 6 months ago. Owner surrendered him after he bit their son. Since then, he's attacked 3 staff members. We've tried everything. Trainers, medication, behavior modification. Nothing works. He's just too damaged. Too angry. Some animals can't be saved." She said it matter-of-factly, the way you might comment on the weather. But Emma wasn't listening to Margaret's words. She was listening to something else. Something in the way Shadow sat completely still in the back of his cage. The way his ears weren't pinned back in aggression but forward, alert, watching. The way his breathing was controlled, measured. This wasn't a dog who wanted to hurt. This was a dog who was terrified. A dog who had learned that attack was the only way to survive. "He's not aggressive," Emma said quietly. The words just slipped out. Margaret turned, surprised that the quiet girl in the wheelchair had spoken. "Excuse me?" "He's not aggressive," Emma repeated, louder this time. "He's scared." Margaret's smile was condescending. "Honey, I've worked with animals for 20 years. That dog is dangerous. There's a difference between scared and vicious. Shadow is vicious." "Can I go closer?" Emma asked. The entire class went silent. Mrs. Chen looked alarmed. "Emma, I don't think that's a good idea." But Emma was already rolling her wheelchair toward the cage. Something was pulling her forward. A recognition. A connection she couldn't explain. She stopped 3 feet from the bars. Shadow's eyes locked onto hers. For 10 seconds neither moved. The air felt electric. Then Emma did something that made everyone gasp. She reached out her hand, fingers extended through the bars. "Hi, Shadow," she whispered. "I see you." "Emma, no!" Margaret lunged forward, but it was too late. Shadow moved. Fast. Faster than anyone expected. He charged the front of the cage, teeth bared, a growl erupting from deep in his chest. The class screamed. Mrs. Chen grabbed Emma's wheelchair, yanking her back. But Emma didn't scream. She didn't pull her hand away. She just kept looking into Shadow's eyes. And then, something impossible happened. Shadow stopped, 1 inch from Emma's fingers. The growl died in his throat. His muscles, tensed for attack, slowly relaxed. He sat down. And then, so gently it seemed like a dream, he pressed his nose against Emma's fingertips through the bars. The shelter went silent. Margaret stood frozen, mouth open. Mrs. Chen's hands shook on Emma's wheelchair. No one could believe what they had just witnessed. Shadow, the dog that had sent grown men to the emergency room, was sitting perfectly still, eyes closed, as Emma's fingers gently scratched behind his ears through the cage bars. "I told you," Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face. "He's just scared." Margaret found her voice. "That's impossible. That dog hasn't let anyone touch him in 6 months." But Emma wasn't listening. She was lost in the moment, in the feeling of connection. For the first time since the accident, since her mother died, since she lost everything, Emma felt seen. And somehow, she knew Shadow felt it too. 2 broken souls recognizing each other across the divide of species and circumstance. "I want to adopt him," Emma said. The words hung in the air like an absurd dream. Margaret laughed, but it came out nervous. "Sweetheart, that's not possible. First, he's scheduled to be euthanized. Second, he's dangerous. Third, you're a child. You can't adopt a dog." "My aunt can adopt him. I'll convince her." Mrs. Chen knelt beside Emma's wheelchair. "Emma, honey, this is a beautiful moment. But Margaret is right. That dog has a history of violence. And you're in a wheelchair. If he attacked you, you couldn't get away." Emma turned to her teacher. And Mrs. Chen saw something in those young eyes that made her breath catch. Determination. Pure, unbreakable determination. Mrs. Chen, everyone thinks I'm helpless because I can't walk. But I'm not helpless. I saved 11 birds, 2 squirrels, and a cat everyone said couldn't be saved. Shadow isn't dangerous. He's hurt. And hurt things need someone who understands. I understand. Margaret shook her head. I'm sorry, but shelter policy is clear. Aggressive animals cannot be adopted, especially not to homes with vulnerable individuals. Then I'll come visit him. Every day until September 28th. Please. Emma's voice cracked. Please don't kill him. Give me 2 days. Just 2 days. Something in Emma's desperation touched a chord in Margaret. She sighed deeply, running a hand through her graying hair. I can give you the 2 days to visit. But Emma, he's still scheduled for euthanasia on Saturday. There's nothing I can do to change that. The decision came from the board. I'm sorry. That night Emma sat at dinner across from Patricia, who was scrolling through her phone, barely acknowledging Emma's existence. Emma took a deep breath. She had rehearsed this conversation 100 times in her head on the bus ride home. Aunt Patricia, I need to talk to you about something important. Patricia didn't look up. There's a dog at the shelter. His name is Shadow. He needs to be adopted or he'll be killed on Saturday. I want us to adopt him. Now Patricia looked up, her face a mixture of disbelief and annoyance. Are you insane? We can barely afford to feed you and you want a dog? Absolutely not. I'll pay for everything. I have money saved from birthday cards. I'll get a job. I'll do anything. Patricia laughed coldly. A job? You're 12 and in a wheelchair. Who's going to hire you? And what do you have saved? $40? Dog food costs more than that a month, plus vet bills, plus everything else. The answer is no. Please, Aunt Patricia, please. I never ask for anything. I'll take care of him. You won't have to do anything. I promise. I said no, Emma. Drop it. Patricia stood up, conversation over. But Emma didn't drop it. She couldn't. That night she lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Shadow's amber eyes burned into her memory. She thought about his scheduled death. About how he would die believing the world was cruel. Believing no one cared. Just like she felt every single day. The next morning Emma woke up before dawn. She got herself dressed, which took 40 minutes. She wrote a note for Patricia. Gone to shelter. Be back tonight. She didn't ask permission. She didn't wait for approval. For the first time in 3 years, Emma Rodriguez decided she was going to fight for something. The journey to the shelter was 2 miles. Emma's wheelchair was manual, not electric. Her arms burned after the first half mile. Her hands blistered. People stared as she rolled down the sidewalk, a 12-year-old girl alone in a wheelchair. Some offered help. She refused politely. This was something she needed to do herself. She arrived at the shelter at 7:45 in the morning, drenched in sweat, hands bleeding. Margaret was unlocking the front door. She looked shocked. Emma, how did you get here? I wheeled. By yourself? That's 2 miles. I know. Emma rolled past her into the building. I came to see Shadow. Margaret started to protest, then stopped. There was something in Emma's face. Something that reminded Margaret why she had gotten into animal rescue in the first place. Before the bureaucracy. Before the heartbreak became routine. She sighed. 30 minutes. That's all I can give you. Emma rolled to Shadow's cage. He was lying in the corner, head on his paws, but his eyes tracked her approach. When she stopped in front of the bars, he stood up. No growling this time. No bared teeth. Just those amber eyes. Watching. Waiting. Hi, Shadow. Emma said softly. I came back. Just like I promised. She spent the next 30 minutes talking to him. She told him about her mother. About the accident. About living with Patricia. About feeling invisible. About being scared all the time that she would never matter to anyone ever again. I think you understand, she whispered. I think you feel it too. That feeling like you're screaming but no one can hear you. Like you're drowning and everyone just walks past. Shadow moved closer to the bars, listening to every word. But I hear you, Shadow. I see you. And I'm not going to let them give up on you. I promise. When Margaret came to tell her time was up, Emma had a question. What would it take to save him? What would have to happen? Margaret hesitated. Honestly, he would need to show consistent, non-aggressive behavior. And someone would need to adopt him who has experience with traumatized animals. Someone who could provide a secure environment and commit to extensive training. Emma, I know what you're trying to do, but you have to understand. Shadow's case has been reviewed by 3 behavioral specialists. They all reached the same conclusion. He's too far gone. They're wrong, Emma said simply. She came back that afternoon, and that evening. Patricia screamed at her when she finally got home at 8 p.m. Where have you been? I was about to call the police. The shelter. I told you in my note. You can't just leave like that. You're 12 years old. I'm 12 years old and you don't care where I am 99% of the time. But suddenly today you care? The words came out sharper than Emma intended, but she didn't take them back. Patricia's face went red. Get to your room, now. Emma went. But she wasn't defeated, she was planning. That night she made a list in her journal. Everything she knew about Shadow. Everything she had observed. The way he responded to soft voices. The way he relaxed when she hummed. The way his ears perked up when she said his name. He wasn't broken beyond repair. He was waiting. Waiting for someone to prove that trust was possible. The next day, Friday, Emma skipped school. She knew she would face consequences, but Shadow had one day left. One day before the needle ended his story. She arrived at the shelter at 6 a.m. before Margaret got there. She waited outside in her wheelchair, shivering in the September cold. When Margaret arrived, she found Emma asleep, slumped in her chair, dried tear tracks on her face. Something inside Margaret's cynical, world-weary heart cracked open. She gently shook Emma's shoulder. Come on, honey, let's get you inside. Emma's eyes flew open. Is he still alive? Yes, he's still alive. Margaret made Emma hot chocolate and brought her 2 blankets. Then she did something against every regulation in her manual. She opened Shadow's cage door. If this dog attacks you, I lose my job and probably go to jail. But something tells me that's not going to happen. Shadow stood at the back of his cage as the door swung open for the first time in 6 months, without a catchpole and muzzle involved. His muscles tensed. His eyes darted between Margaret and Emma. Every instinct screamed danger. Open doors meant pain, meant hands that grabbed and hit, meant betrayal. But then Emma spoke. It's okay, Shadow. No one's going to hurt you, I promise. You can stay in there if you want, or you can come out. Your choice. She rolled her wheelchair back, giving him space. Margaret stood by the wall, hand on her phone, ready to call for help. The seconds stretched into minutes. Shadow didn't move. Neither did Emma. They just looked at each other. Then, slowly, so slowly it seemed like time itself was holding its breath, Shadow took one step forward. Then another. He reached the open door and stopped. Emma's heart hammered in her chest. That's it, buddy. You're so brave. So brave. Shadow took the final step. He was out of the cage. Free. For 5 seconds he just stood there, as if he couldn't believe it. Then he did something that made Margaret gasp. He walked directly to Emma's wheelchair and sat down beside her, his massive head level with her shoulder. Emma's hand shook as she reached out. Can I pet you? Shadow's answer was to lean into her palm. Emma buried her fingers in his matted fur and started to cry. Deep, wrenching sobs that came from 3 years of holding everything inside. And Shadow, the dog that everyone said couldn't love, couldn't trust, couldn't be saved, pressed closer. As if he understood. As if he was saying, I see you too. Margaret stood frozen, tears streaming down her own face. In 20 years of animal rescue, she had never witnessed anything like this. She pulled out her phone and started recording. Emma, I need you to stay exactly as you are. For the next hour, Margaret documented everything. Shadow following Emma as she rolled around the shelter. Shadow sitting calmly as Emma examined his scars. Shadow eating from Emma's hand. Shadow lying down with his head on Emma's lap while she read to him from a book Mrs. Chen had given her. By noon, Margaret had made 3 phone calls. First, to the shelter board. Second, to Dr. James Morrison, a renowned animal behaviorist. Third, to Patricia. Patricia arrived furious. What the hell is going on? The school called me. Emma never showed up. I thought she was kidnapped. Ma'am, I'm Margaret, the shelter director. Emma is fine. She's with a dog. I told her she can't have a dog. This is ridiculous. Margaret's voice went cold. Ma'am, what's ridiculous is that you have a 12-year-old niece who wheeled herself 2 miles in a manual wheelchair because she's trying to save a life. What's ridiculous is that this child, who has every reason to be angry at the world, is showing more compassion and courage than most adults I know. Now, I've contacted Dr. Morrison. He's reviewing the footage right now. If he approves, and if you consent, we have a possibility of saving this dog's life and giving your niece something to live for. So I'm asking you, as one human being to another, please consider this. Patricia opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. Something in Margaret's words hit her. She pushed past into the shelter and stopped dead. There was Emma in her wheelchair with the biggest, scariest looking dog Patricia had ever seen. His head was on Emma's lap. Emma was smiling. Actually smiling. Patricia hadn't seen her niece smile in 3 years. "Emma," Patricia said quietly. Emma looked up, fear flashing in her eyes. "Please don't make me leave. Please, Aunt Patricia. Just give me 5 more minutes." Patricia surprised herself with her next words. "I'll give you more than 5 minutes. I'll wait." Dr. Morrison arrived 2 hours later. He was a tall man with kind eyes and gray hair. He watched the footage Margaret had recorded 3 times. Then he spent an hour observing Emma and Shadow together. Finally, he called Margaret and Patricia into the office. "I've been a behaviorist for 35 years, he said slowly. "I've worked with over 2,000 aggressive dogs. And I'm telling you both, what I just witnessed is not scientifically explainable by conventional understanding. That dog should not trust humans. Based on his history, his trauma, his behavioral patterns, he should have attacked the moment that cage door opened." "So what are you saying?" Patricia asked. "I'm saying that sometimes healing doesn't come from technique or medication or training. Sometimes it comes from connection, from 2 wounded souls recognizing each other. That little girl has done in 2 days what 3 specialists couldn't do in 6 months. Dr. Morrison continued, "However, we need to be realistic. Shadow is still a traumatized animal. He's bonded with Emma, which is extraordinary, but that doesn't mean he's safe around other people. I can't in good conscience recommend adoption to a home with a vulnerable child without extensive conditions." Patricia felt relief flood through her, ready to use this as her exit. But then she looked through the office window. Emma was leaning out of her wheelchair, her arms wrapped around Shadow's neck, whispering something into his ear. The dog's eyes were closed, his entire massive body relaxed in a way Margaret had never seen. "What conditions?" Patricia heard herself ask. She couldn't believe the words coming out of her mouth. Dr. Morrison looked surprised, then thoughtful. "First, I would need to work with Shadow and Emma personally. 3 sessions per week minimum for 6 months. Second, your home would need to be evaluated and modified for safety. Third, Emma would need to commit to training classes. Fourth, Shadow cannot be around other people unsupervised until I clear him. And fifth, if at any point I believe there's a danger, Shadow comes back here immediately." "That sounds expensive," Patricia said, her practical nature kicking in. "I'll do it pro bono," Dr. Morrison said quietly. "In 35 years, I've never seen anything like this. I want to document it, study it, understand it. If this works, it could change how we approach trauma rehabilitation in animals, maybe even in people." Margaret leaned forward. "Patricia, I'll waive all adoption fees. I'll provide food for the first 6 months. The shelter board has already approved based on Dr. Morrison's preliminary assessment. The only question is whether you're willing to give this a chance." Patricia looked at both of them. 2 strangers asking her to take responsibility for a dangerous animal and a disabled child she had never wanted in the first place. Every logical bone in her body screamed no. But then she thought about Emma's smile, about the light in her eyes that had been dead for 3 years. "If Emma can wheel herself 2 miles to save a dog, I guess I can at least try," Patricia said finally. When they told Emma, she didn't scream with joy like a normal child. She just looked at Patricia with those old, wise eyes and whispered, "Thank you." But it was the way she said it, like Patricia had just given her the world. And maybe she had. The first month was hell. Shadow destroyed Patricia's apartment. He chewed through 2 couch cushions, knocked over a bookshelf, and howled every time Emma went to school. Dr. Morrison came 3 times a week as promised. He taught Emma commands, safety protocols, and how to read Shadow's body language. But more than that, he witnessed something he had never seen in his decades of work. Emma and Shadow had a language, not words but something deeper. Emma would hum and Shadow would calm. Shadow would press against Emma's wheelchair in crowded places, becoming a living barrier. When Emma had nightmares about the accident, Shadow would somehow know and would sleep pressed against her bed, his breathing syncing with hers until she calmed. Patricia watched this unfold with a mixture of wonder and shame. Shame for how she had treated Emma, for how she had seen her as a burden rather than a human being who was drowning. One night, 3 months after Shadow came home, Patricia knocked on Emma's door. "Can I come in?" Emma looked up from where she was sitting on the floor, brushing Shadow's now clean coat. "Sure." Patricia sat on the bed, unusually hesitant. "Emma, I need to say something. I've been a terrible guardian. I took you in because it was my obligation, not because I wanted to. I made you feel unwanted. And I'm sorry." Watching you with Shadow, watching you fight for him, watching you love him, I realized something. You're not the broken one. I am. Emma's hand stilled on Shadow's fur. She had imagined this conversation 1,000 times. Imagined screaming at Patricia, telling her how much she hurt. But now that it was happening, she just felt tired. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve better. Because I want to try to be better. I can't replace your mom. I'll never be Maria. But maybe I can be someone who sees you, really sees you, the way Shadow does. Emma felt tears building. Do you mean that? I do. Patricia's voice cracked. I'm not good at this. At feelings. At being what anyone needs. But you've shown me something, Mija. You've shown me that it's never too late to heal. If Shadow can learn to trust again, maybe I can learn to love. It was the first time Patricia had called her Mija. The first time she had used her mother's word. Emma started to cry. And Patricia, awkward and uncertain, moved to the floor and hugged her niece for the first time in 3 years. Shadow watched them both, his tail wagging slowly, as if he understood that something important was mending. The transformation didn't happen overnight. Healing never does. But gradually Patricia's apartment became a home. Patricia started cooking Emma's favorite meals, the ones Maria used to make. She installed proper ramps and widened doorways. She started asking about Emma's day and actually listening to the answers. And Emma slowly began to trust again. To believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved to be loved. Shadow's change was even more dramatic. By month 6, Dr. Morrison began introducing Shadow to other people under controlled conditions. The dog that had attacked 3 staff members now sat calmly as strangers petted him, as long as Emma was nearby. Dr. Morrison wrote a paper about the case that was published in the Journal of Veterinary Behavior. He titled it, The Healing Power of Mutual Recognition, a case study in interspecies trauma recovery. But the real miracle happened on a spring day, exactly 1 year after Emma and Shadow met. Emma was now 13. She and Shadow had become a fixture in Riverside. People knew them. The girl in the wheelchair and her massive German shepherd who went everywhere together. Local news had done a story. A video of them had gone viral online. But Emma didn't care about fame. She cared that Shadow was alive. That she was alive. That they had each other. On this particular spring day, Patricia surprised Emma. Get ready. We're going somewhere. Where? You'll see. They drove for an hour, Patricia saying nothing despite Emma's questions. Finally, they pulled up to a large building with a sign that read, Riverside Rehabilitation Center. Emma's stomach dropped. Why are we here? Patricia turned to face her. Because Dr. Morrison isn't the only one who's been working. I've been talking to specialists. Emma, your paralysis, according to your medical records, is incomplete. That means there's a chance, a small chance, with intensive physical therapy, you might regain some function. Not full mobility necessarily, but something. I've been saving money. Dr. Morrison connected me with people here who work on a sliding scale. And I want you to try, only if you want to. Emma stared at her aunt, shocked. You did this? For me? Of course for you. Emma, you saved a dog everyone said couldn't be saved. Let's see if we can do the same for you. The therapy was brutal. Emma worked 5 days a week, 3 hours per day. The pain was excruciating. Some days she cried from frustration. Some days she wanted to quit. But Shadow was there for every session. The staff had made an exception, allowing him to stay with Emma. When she wanted to give up, she would look at Shadow lying beside the parallel bars, and she would remember. If he could heal, so could she. 4 months into therapy, something happened. Emma was working on standing exercises, supported by bars and her therapist. She had done this hundreds of times, her legs barely responding. But this time, when she tried to push down, she felt it. A flicker. A tiny spark of sensation in her right leg. Did you feel that? The therapist asked, seeing Emma's face. I felt something, Emma whispered. Over the next year, the impossible became possible. The flicker became movement. The movement became steps. Not normal steps, not easy steps, but steps. With leg braces and crutches, Emma could stand. She could walk short distances. She would never run, never dance the way she had imagined as a little girl. But she could walk. The day Emma walked from her wheelchair to Shadow without assistance, a distance of 10 feet, everyone in the rehabilitation center cried. Shadow seemed to understand the significance. He stood perfectly still, waiting, as Emma took one painful step after another. When she finally reached him and threw her arms around his neck, he licked her face, his tail wagging so hard his entire body shook. Dr. Morrison was there. He had been documenting everything. "Emma, do you understand what you've done? You've not only healed Shadow, you've healed yourself. You've proven something that medical journals will study for years. The mind and body connection. The power of purpose. Of love." But Emma wasn't thinking about medical journals. She was thinking about a promise she had made in her journal 3 years ago. A promise to her mother. "Mama, I'm not just trying to be strong anymore. I am strong. And I'm not alone." Word spread about Emma and Shadow. News outlets came. Documentaries were filmed. But Emma, now 15 years old, used the attention for something bigger. She started a nonprofit called Second Chances. The mission was simple: match rescue animals with people facing physical or emotional challenges. She worked with Dr. Morrison and Margaret to develop a program that paired traumatized shelter dogs with individuals in rehabilitation centers. The first match was a veteran with PTSD and a pit bull named Duke who had been abused. The second was a teenager recovering from a suicide attempt and a cat that had been found starving. The third was an elderly man with Alzheimer's and a senior dog no one wanted. Each pairing was carefully evaluated. Each one was a risk. But each one worked. Within 2 years, Second Chances had expanded to 7 cities. Emma gave talks at schools, hospitals, and shelters. She shared her story. Shadow was always by her side, now a certified therapy dog. Patricia had quit one of her jobs to help run the nonprofit. The woman who had never wanted children became Emma's fiercest advocate and partner. On the 5th anniversary of the day Emma and Shadow met, the shelter held a celebration. Over 200 people attended. People whose lives had been changed by Second Chances. Margaret stood at the podium, tears in her eyes. "5 years ago, I was ready to euthanize a dog I believed was beyond saving. I was prepared to write him off as another tragic case. But a 12-year-old girl in a wheelchair saw something I couldn't. She saw a soul that needed to be understood, not fixed. Emma Rodriguez taught me that we're too quick to give up on the broken things. Too quick to label something as damaged beyond repair. But the truth is, most things aren't broken. They're just waiting for someone who speaks their language." Emma rolled to the podium in her wheelchair. She still used it for long distances, though she could walk with braces when needed. Shadow sat beside her, graying around his muzzle now, but eyes still sharp and golden. "I'm not going to stand here and tell you that love fixes everything," Emma began. "Because it doesn't. Shadow still has triggers. I still have hard days where my body doesn't cooperate. Healing isn't a destination. It's a practice. It's choosing every single day to keep going even when you're scared, even when it hurts, even when everyone tells you it's impossible." She paused, looking out at the faces in the crowd. Veterans and abuse survivors, kids in wheelchairs and adults with invisible scars. "But here's what I will tell you. You are not your trauma. You are not your limitations. You are not what happened to you." Shadow was labeled aggressive, dangerous, hopeless. But that wasn't the truth. The truth was he was scared and hurt, and needed someone to see past the fear to who he really was. And maybe that's true for all of us. Emma's voice grew stronger. "I was told I'd never walk again, never live independently, never matter. But I'm standing here, well, sitting here, to tell you that what people say about you doesn't define you. What defines you is what you do with the cards you're dealt." Shadow and I were both dealt terrible hands. We both had every reason to give up, but we found each other, and in finding each other, we found ourselves. She reached down and scratched Shadow behind his ears, the same gesture she had made through the cage bars 5 years ago. The world is full of shadows. Dogs and people who have been hurt so badly they don't know how to trust anymore. Who have built walls so high they can't see the light. And the world is also full of people who will tell you those walls can't come down. That some damage is permanent. That some souls can't be saved. Emma looked directly into the camera that was recording. "But I'm here to tell you they're wrong. Every single person in this room is proof they're wrong. Second Chances isn't about rescuing animals. It's about recognizing that we all need someone to believe in us when we can't believe in ourselves. It's about being that person for someone else, even when, especially when, everyone else has given up." The crowd erupted in applause. Shadow, well-trained now, didn't even flinch at the noise. He just leaned against Emma's wheelchair, solid and steady, the way he had been for 5 years. After the ceremony, a young boy approached Emma. He couldn't have been more than 8 years old, and he walked with forearm crutches, his legs thin and weak from cerebral palsy. His mother stood behind him, her hand on his shoulder. "Miss Emma?" the boy said shyly. "Hi there. What's your name? Daniel, and this is my mom, Karen. Nice to meet you both. What can I do for you, Daniel? The boy looked at Shadow with a mixture of awe and fear. I wanted to meet Shadow. The kids at school say I walk funny. They say I'm slow. They say I'll never be normal. His voice cracked. Is that true? Emma felt her heart break and heal at the same time. She gestured to the space next to her. Can you come a little closer? Daniel hobbled forward on his crutches. Shadow, sensing the boy's nervousness, lay down, making himself smaller, less intimidating. Emma spoke softly. Daniel, let me tell you a secret. Normal is the most boring thing in the world. Normal is for people who are too scared to be extraordinary. You know what makes you special? Not your crutches, not your walk, but the fact that you get up every single day and keep going even when it's hard. That takes courage most people will never have. But everyone can walk except me, Daniel whispered. Everyone could walk except me too, Emma said. And for a long time that felt like the end of the world. But then I realized something. The things that make us different, the things that we think are our biggest weaknesses, those are actually our superpowers. Because they teach us empathy. They teach us resilience. They teach us to see people the way Shadow sees people, not by what they look like on the outside, but by what's in their hearts. She pointed to Shadow. You see this dog? Everyone said he was too broken to love, too dangerous to save. But they were wrong. They were looking at his scars and his fear and calling it his identity. But that wasn't who he was. That was just what happened to him. Do you understand the difference? Daniel nodded slowly. What happened to me isn't who I am. Exactly. What happened to you is cerebral palsy. Who you are is Daniel. A brave kid who came to talk to me even though he was nervous. A smart kid who asks the hard questions. A strong kid who shows up to school every day even when it's hard. That's who you are. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Can I pet Shadow? Of course. Shadow, this is our friend Daniel. Can you say hello? Shadow lifted his head and gently nuzzled Daniel's hand. The boy laughed, a pure sound of joy. He's so soft. Karen, Daniel's mother, wiped her own tears. Thank you, she mouthed to Emma. As the evening wound down and people began to leave, Patricia helped Emma pack up. They had come so far from that cramped, smoke-filled apartment. Patricia had stopped smoking 2 years ago. She had started going to therapy. She had learned to say, I love you, without it feeling like swallowing glass. You did good today, mija, Patricia said, using the word that had become natural between them. We did good, Tia, Emma replied. Patricia was no longer just Aunt Patricia. She was Tia. She was family. They drove home together, Shadow in the back seat, his head resting on Emma's shoulder. Emma looked out the window at Riverside passing by. This town that had seen her at her lowest. That had watched her mother die. That had witnessed her first steps in a wheelchair and her first steps out of one. This town that had almost killed Shadow, but instead became the birthplace of second chances. When they got home, Emma went through her nightly routine. She helped Patricia prepare dinner. They ate together, talking about plans for the nonprofit's expansion. After dinner, Emma took Shadow for their evening walk. She used her crutches, Shadow matching her slower pace perfectly. They walked to the park, the same park where 9-year-old Emma had once rescued injured birds. Emma sat on a bench and Shadow lay at her feet. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. You know what, Shadow? Emma said softly. I used to think that night of the accident was the worst thing that could ever happen to me. I used to think losing Mom and losing the use of my legs meant my life was over before it really began. Shadow's ears perked up, listening the way he always did. But if none of that had happened, I wouldn't have been in that shelter that day. I wouldn't have seen you. And you would have died on September 28th, believing that the world had nothing but cruelty to offer. And I would have died too. Maybe not physically, but emotionally. I would have stayed that invisible girl who believed she didn't matter. She ran her fingers through Shadow's fur, now soft and healthy. So maybe it wasn't the worst thing. Maybe it was the thing that needed to happen for us to find each other. For us to become who we were meant to be. I don't know if I believe in fate or destiny or any of that. But I believe in this. I believe in you and me. I believe that broken things can heal. I believe that second chances are real. Shadow lifted his head and placed it on Emma's lap, his amber eyes looking up at her with complete trust. Complete love. The eyes that had once held only rage now held peace. Emma thought about that 12-year-old girl who had rolled herself 2 miles to save a dog, who had looked at the most aggressive animal in the shelter and seen not danger, but a mirror, who had refused to accept that some souls were beyond saving. She wanted to go back and tell that girl, "You're going to be okay. Better than okay. You're going to change lives, starting with your own." But she couldn't go back. None of us can. We can only go forward, taking our scars and our stories and our second chances and turning them into something beautiful, something meaningful, something that matters. As the sun disappeared below the horizon, Emma stood up with her crutches. "Come on, boy, let's go home." They walked back slowly, the girl who couldn't walk and the dog who couldn't love. Except they could. They did. And in doing so, they proved that the labels we give to broken things say more about our lack of imagination than they do about the things themselves. That night, Emma wrote in her journal, the same journal where she had once written letters to her dead mother filled with despair. But tonight's entry was different. "Dear Mama, I know you're not here to read this, but I feel you sometimes in the way the sun hits my face, in the way Shadow looks at me, in the way Tia Patricia now says, 'I love you' before bed. I want to tell you that I'm okay. More than okay. I found my purpose, Mama. It found me in a cage at an animal shelter. It found me in amber eyes that everyone else saw as dangerous. You taught me to save broken things. Birds with bent wings. Cats everyone said were feral. And I'm still doing that, Mama. I'm saving them and they're saving me right back. I think that's what life is. Not about being unbreakable, but about finding the people and the dogs who help us put our pieces back together. I miss you every single day. But I'm not drowning anymore. I'm swimming. And Shadow is swimming right beside me. Thank you for teaching me to see. To really see. I love you, Mama. Always. Emma." She closed the journal and looked over at Shadow, asleep on his bed beside hers. His chest rose and fell in steady rhythm. At peace. Safe. Home. Emma turned off the light and lay back. In the darkness, she whispered the words she had said 5 years ago through the bars of a cage. The words that had started everything. "I see you." And somewhere, in the place where broken souls go to heal, her mother whispered back, "I see you too, Mija. And I'm so proud of who you've become." The next morning would bring new challenges, new animals to save, new people to help, new obstacles to overcome. But tonight, in this moment, Emma Rodriguez and Shadow were exactly where they were meant to be. Together, healed, whole. Because that's the truth about second chances. They don't erase the first chance that went wrong. They don't pretend the pain didn't happen. They simply say, "Yes, that happened. Yes, it hurt. Yes, you broke." But breaking isn't the end of the story. It's just the middle. And the ending? The ending is yours to write. Emma and Shadow wrote an ending that became a beginning. For themselves. For second chances. For every person who ever believed they were too damaged to deserve love. Too broken to be fixed. Too lost to be found. They proved them all wrong. One wheelchair roll at a time. One gentle touch through cage bars at a time. One choice to see past the scars to the soul underneath at a time. And if they could do it, maybe, just maybe, so can you. Because you are not your worst day. You are not your trauma. You are not your limitations. You are the person who decides to get up one more time, to try one more time, to believe one more time that healing is possible, that love is real, that second chances exist. They do. Emma and Shadow are living proof. And their story, this story, isn't just about a girl and a dog. It's about all of us. Every person who has ever felt invisible. Every soul who has ever been labeled too broken. Every heart that has ever wondered if they'll ever be whole again. The answer is yes. Not perfect. Not without scars. Not without hard days. But whole in the way that matters. Whole in the ways that count. Whole in your ability to love and be loved. To matter and to make others feel like they matter. That's what Emma learned from Shadow. That's what Shadow learned from Emma. And that's what they're teaching the world, one second chance at a time. So the next time you see someone struggling, someone different, someone broken, remember this story. Remember that the most aggressive dog in the shelter just needed one person to see past his teeth to his heart. Remember that the girl everyone pitied became the girl who changed everything. And remember that you have that same power. To see, to believe, to save, to be saved. That's the real miracle of this story. Not that it happened to Emma and Shadow, but that it can happen to anyone, including you. All you have to do is look a little closer. Listen a little harder. Love a little braver. The rest will follow. Because second chances don't come to those who wait for them. They come to those who fight for them, who wheel themselves 2 miles with bleeding hands because a life depends on it, who refuse to accept that some souls are beyond saving, who whisper, "I see you," into the darkness and mean it with every fiber of their being. Be that person. Find your shadow. Save them. Let them save you. And write an ending that becomes someone else's beginning. That's the lesson. That's the truth. That's the gift Emma and Shadow gave to the world. Now it's your turn to pass it on.